Welcome back to all the stuff that's new in Unity 6.0. We're moving on to the HDRP. Added support for overriding material properties such as smoothness, albedo, and normal maps on all materials to facilitate material and lighting debugging. The material override feature in HDRP is available through the rendering debugger's lighting panel when rendering through the path tracer pipeline. Added the sky occlusion feature to adaptive probe volumes to allow time of day with static probe volumes. Disabled storing of baked data as streaming asset in adaptive probe volumes to make it compatible with asset bundles and addressables. Added AMD Fidelity FX Super Resolution 2, Unity script bindings, and HDRP integration. They improved on existing MipMap streaming debug views and added more. The current offering in HDRP is consistent with what URP offers. Added support for spatial temporal post-processing SDP upscaling solution. They added HDRP path tracer support for decals projectors. The path tracer does not support emissions from decals. They added the ability to stream probe volume data from disk at runtime. You can enable or disable streaming or disk streaming for different quality levels. Made HDRP shader graph decals compatible with transparent objects. This means you can use decals created with shader graph to affect transparent objects to build procedural effects like raindrops, ripples, custom engravings, dirt effects on glass. Added a night sky with stars and celestial bodies to the HDRP physical sky. Added a shader graph outfit for the physically based sky and added controls to create a moon. Added visualization of async compute passes and their synchronization points to the render graph viewer. Added beer shadow maps for volumetric clouds. Added a volume profile field to HD render pipeline asset. Added a material type for thin objects with colored transmission. Added the option to disable clear coat on the material for lit shader graphs. Added the global pass API that you can use to inject custom passes in the render pipeline without any game objects in the scene. Added a volumetric fog full screen debug mode output for arbitrary output variables. Added adaptive probe volumes ability to stream data directly from the disk. This feature is only available on devices with compute shader compatibility. Added the ability to use the baking API to bake adaptive probe volumes independently from light maps or reflection probes. Light layers and decal layers are now managed in similar ways in both HDRP and URP. In HDRP, they now share the first 16 rendering layers, instead of using 8 separate bits each. Additionally, a new option in the HDRP asset allows access to a full screen buffer that contains the rendering layer masks of rendered objects. HDRP can sample that buffer from the shader graph through the HD sample buffer node and use it to implement custom effects, like outlining objects on a specific rendering layer. All ray tracing HDRP features, ray trace shadows, reflections, AO, global illumination, path tracing, recursive rendering, are officially out of experimental in Unity 2023.1.0. Added a foam system to the HDRP water system. Probe volumes are out of experimental. Revamped the control interface to provide a better experience when you place probe volumes like dynamic objects and some static objects, stream data from GPU memory, interpolate lighting datasets, and work with volumetric fog and particles. Added a third level of noise for volumetric clouds. Added generic rendering layer mode support. Added high quality line rendering, which unlocks improved performance and image quality for line topology. Added the ability to compute the thickness of an object. Added improvements to the SSS lighting model. Added ray tracing terrain support for HDRP. Added ray trace shadows for pyramid and box-shaped spotlights. Added the ray tracing light cluster to path tracer. Added volumetric material support for local volumetric fog volumes. Expose material type in materials using the lit shader graph. Improve stripping of unused features. Specular color on HDRP lit and HDRP stack lit below 2% can be used to suppress specular lighting completely when specular fade is enabled. They improved the water rendering system in the following ways. They added functionality to water mask so it dynamically removes water from inside a boat or in a cave in the middle of an island. They removed the water deformer to dynamically deform water locally. For example, to deform water around a moving ship, deform waves near shores, or deform water in a vortex. They added flow maps to create local currents, to manage surface waves that follow currents, and the water query API to allow objects to drift. Added a water line to manage the transition for cameras that are half underwater. Improved visual quality of water, and improved UX of the water system. Added an extra optional pass to compute thickness of transparent objects at runtime to get more accurate refraction and transparency rendering. Improved visual quality when using temporal anti-aliasing, TAA, with two new options to perform sharpening. The first option is post-processing pass that offers higher quality sharpening, control over the amount of sharpening, and an option to reduce possible ringing artifacts. The second option is to run contrast adaptive sharpening from AMD Fidelity FX. Specular light can now be completely faded when using a specular color workflow using the HDRP lit and HDRP stack lit shaders by toggling a new option that can be found in the HDRP global shaders under miscellaneous specular fade. Added rendering layer support to adaptive probe volumes to address light leaking issues in interior and exterior scenarios. Added a new leak reduction mode for adaptive probe volume sampling called Quality, which ensures that no invalid probes are sampled. Implemented an anti-seam mechanism to smooth transitions between multiple subdivision levels in adaptive probe volumes. Whew. And that was all the cool stuff in HDRP that was added or changed in Unity 6.0. I'm Michael with Ready Play Games, and I hope you liked it.